listening to a podcast from The Word.
So, Mark, it's finally here. U2 are playing The Sphere in Las Vegas this evening. Just
this evening, on the day we're recording, they're playing their first show tonight. That's right. I've been watching various interviews with them. I must admit, I'm fascinated by this whole thing. Aren't you? I think it's really, really interesting. The Sphere, we've talked about it before on podcasts, but to recap, this is a gigantic construction built in Las Vegas. It's taken several years to complete, cost $2 billion. It's spherical, obviously. It's 100 meters high, isn't it? And 150 meters wide. It has 18,000 seats. It's got a gigantic digital screen all around you and indeed underneath you. It's got 1.2 million lights. It has 160,000 speakers. The sound system will deliver sound through the floorboards. It has 4D features. Dave, I'm not even going to pretend that I know what 4D means, but I'm just saying it anyway. It includes this. Do you know about this? It includes scent and wind. So there's sensory impressions. You suddenly get aromas. You suddenly get a sense of movement of the air. Your seat will vibrate. There are animatronic robots and holographs. And the projections actually appear on the outside of the building. Now, if you're outside the building, you can see what's going on in the show. And at one point, apparently, they project what the Sphere looks like in Las Vegas if you were looking at it from the outside, and thus the building disappears.
Yes.
It's extraordinary, do you think? Plus, there's really interesting, I'm looking at this little site about it. It says, all seats will have high-speed internet access. That's the key hook, isn't it? So that you can tweet to all your mates saying, basically, I'm here and you're not, you know. But I am fascinated by this, you know. Also, how exhausting would that be? How much can your brain absorb?
Well, yes, I suppose, yeah. Our elderly brains, probably not so much, you know, but I suppose if it's somebody younger, although it's probably, you know, given the ticket prices, it's probably going to be an older demographic. I'm looking right now at the site where I can still buy tickets for tonight.
Yes, they're available. I had a look at that too.
A few are available. In section 306, you can get two together, thankfully, for $2,670. That's obviously the kind of sweet spot in row 6 and section 306. And it's really fascinating because this is obviously means the advent of the £1,000 night out, doesn't it, really? You know, because once it's two people, and you've paid to get there, or you're in a hotel or whatever, and then you maybe got a meal afterwards, and you've probably spent money on merchandise. It's £1,000 night out, which is, you think, how did beat music end up like this? You know what I mean? How did it end up outstripping grand opera and, you know, prestige sporting occasions in terms of the amount of money that people would be prepared to spend? And
well, I was thinking that specifically because I can remember first seeing U2, I think it was 42 years ago in October 1981 in Bracknell Sports Centre. Bracknell Sports Centre, which they'd half filled. And a little changing room, which I can really remember going in to interview them, a little changing room with some wall bars in it and some gymnastic equipment. And Bono was practicing his scales and all that. They went on half-filled Bracknell Sports Centre. It's astonishing. Now, as you say, £1,000 night out.
It's £1,000 night out, you know, and people will pay it. And do you know what? It just struck me when I was sitting here looking at the site and looking at the seats available. If I was in Las Vegas tonight, do you know what, Mark?
Well, if I could afford it, I'd go.
I'd pay it.
Yeah, I would. Because the first night as well.
No, but not just that, because I've been thinking about the kind of the upside of doing it in the way that they've done it, or the way that they're going to do it, is that it will be something that most big rock and roll shows are not. which is a kind of controlled experience. You know what I mean? You're in this particular environment.
Yeah.
You're not going to be distracted by anything impinging on the environment, planes flying overhead or the weather turning nasty or all those kind of things, which tend to really rather affect people's experience of live music, don't they? As the scale gets greater, this is all taken away, and so this is like, now you and I have not been to the ABBA show, which has been running in London for years now. But what do we find? Everybody we talk to has been to it. It goes back.
This is really good. Yeah.
But one of the things that they obviously like about it is it's a controlled experience. It is what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nothing ruins the illusion. Your disbelief is not. You're happy to suspend your disbelief in that environment because you're not let down by anything that impinges upon it. And I think U2 at the Sphere would probably be quite similar. Now it's very early days. I couldn't help.
Although it is actually a show, isn't it? It's not, as though it's all coming off one bank of computers. I mean, they are playing. So I suppose there are variables, which is interesting because they only appeared to be rehearsing for the first time in the last week or whatever.
That's the interesting thing that they interviewed. I was watching TV interviews with like the production manager and the designer and so forth. They've clearly been working on it for months, if not years. And then they talked to Mono and The Edge. Have you rehearsed? And clearly they weren't expecting that question, were they? Really?
No, they weren't. They were very thrown by the CNN News, wasn't it? They were very thrown by it. Said, well, we did rehearse last night. Thanks for asking. It didn't go terribly well.
I thought that was very interesting, because that indicates to what extent we are in the age of spectacle, or we have been in the age of spectacle ever since Live Aid. It's not about music at all. It's about spectacle. It's about what you pay to see. It's about the things that you see that you can then go away, go home, and tell people you've seen, and that you've seen them and that they haven't seen them.
They haven't, precisely.
That's the basic deal. Nobody is going away going, do you know they did a really good version of One? They're not going away at all.
It's nothing to do with that, is it? Because
they'll go, at one point, the desert appears in the background or something like that.
Because you are immersed 360 degrees around you in a massive digital screen, aren't you? Just with being bombarded with images, quite apart from the vibrating seat and the aromas and the wind. I mean, it's just an utterly absorbing experience, isn't it? And so that will be completely unlike being outside and seeing them in some field somewhere.
So, if I were there, I would pay it. And you know what the good news is, Mark? There are still some seats available.
The Word Podcast, prime cuts of popular culture served fresh each week.
So have you seen the Roger Waters documentary?
I've seen it. I've seen the one on YouTube by John Ware. I've seen it. It's called The Dark Side of Roger Waters. And it's about his, it's about the mounting evidence for his anti-Semitism, really, isn't it? I mean, that's the gist of it, I guess.
Well, the film's been kind of, I suppose, commissioned by the campaign against anti-Semitism. And I suppose it's got two key people it interviews. One is Bob Ezrin.
Yeah, the old producer of 3 Floyd albums, wasn't he?
And he produced The Wall and so forth. He produced Alice Cooper back in the day.
Yeah, he did.
Very successful producer. And a guy whose name escapes me.
Norbert Stachel?
There you go.
Norbert Stachel, the saxophone player.
That's a name that didn't ought to escape me.
It's pretty memorable.
He was a saxophone player with Roger Waters, who liked Bob Ezrin as Jewish.
Yeah.
And about their experiences of Roger Waters' anti-Semitic pronouncements. And I found it absolutely startling.
I was staggered.
It's a half an hour. I
was absolutely staggered by it. Because we should point out that they have an email, don't they, from 2010, in which he's talking about resuscitating the giant inflatable pig, the old Floyd pig, for his solo shows. And all about which are too ghastly to be mentioned, but all the kind of anti-Semitic slogans and images that he wanted on there. Am I right? You know, the Star of David, the dollar signs, and all sorts of really, really ghastly expressions that we really couldn't use. He recently there was a controversy, wasn't there, in Germany when he was wearing kind of Nazi-style trench coat on stage. The Norbert Stachel talks about working with them and going out. Very interesting because it's about power. It's about the idea.
Yeah, oh God, yeah.
It's all about power. I'm employing you. You're in my band. You don't want to lose this gig. And therefore I can say whatever you want, whatever I want rather, and you're not really going to complain about it or take me to task because you're frightened you might get fired from the band. That was broadly it, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's
very interesting point. Yeah. And he knew that Norbert Stachel was Jewish and was talking about really revolting things about the food that they were eating there, which was Jewish food. Stuff about his relatives that he was impersonating in a really cruel, racist way. I mean, it was appalling, wasn't it? And Bob Ezrin was talking about how he would constantly come in and talk about other Jewish people in the organisation or Jewish people they'd met in a really, really unpleasant way, knowing, of course, that Bob Ezrin was Jewish. That Bob Ezrin wasn't going to complain about it either. I mean, I thought it was astonishing. And the most shocking bit was that, you know, we've talked about this before on the podcast, that Polly Sampson, who is the wife, of course, of David Gilmour, whose father came to Britain on the Kinder transport in 1938, tweeted, didn't she, very memorably, not that long ago, that he was misogynistic and he was racist and he described him as being anti-Semitic to your rotten core. And I didn't realise that a few days after this, on stage at the O2 in London, in front of what would that be, 20,000 people, he talked about this, didn't he? And he said something so horrible and so childish and mean and misogynist about Polly Sampson. Basically something that you would expect Lawrence Fox to have said. Actually,
absolutely.
It was virtually the same thing about waking up next to the... Oh, God, it was... I can't even repeat it. It was so awful, actually, and offensive. And so you come away from this thinking, A, why does he say these things? And which he, of course, denies when interviewed. And B, what points is he trying to make? I don't know. Did you get any idea?
No, although the thing that stuck with me is the bit right at the beginning of the documentary where it's from some other documentary he's done where it's just to camera. Where he's basically saying that the government of Israel is doing everything in its power to kind of put him out of business.
Yes.
You know, which I just thought...
It's a vendetta.
You know, the idea that the Mossad or whatever has Roger Waters on the list, you know, I think it probably comes quite a long way down. And it's like you were saying, what comes out of it is he's got a megalomaniac streak to him, you know. Yeah. And
desperate for
I'm not an expert on Pink Floyd by any means, but witnessing this makes you kind of recalibrate your scale of you know, intra-band arguments.
Yeah.
It makes John Lennon's "How Do You Sleep" like a mild little spat. You know what I mean? This is, you know, it makes the worst that happened with Spinal Tap look like nothing at all.
That's right.
And you just imagine if you're Dave Gilmour and Nick Mason, how you must feel about this, you know what I mean? Because you still have this shared heritage, don't you? You know, with Pink Floyd. And you kind of got used to the fact that people have sort of warm feelings about it or warmly disposed towards it. And suddenly you've got this character.
It tangles your relationship with it, doesn't it? You look back at those concerts, you look back at those records that you really liked, you know. You open Medal and you open up the gatefold sleeve and there's Roger Waters, and your immediate impression of Roger Waters is very, very different, certainly in our case, now to what it was. They must be mortified.
And
it must be slightly the way Johnny Marr feels looking back at some of those old Smiths records.
I suppose so.
I mean, I think it's quite similar, you know, that this guy's just eroding all that goodwill and that good feeling, you know. There's a point in the documentary where somebody, it may have been John Ware himself, describes Roger Waters brilliantly, I thought, as being exquisitely sensitive and exquisitely insensitive.
Yes.
Meaning that he was incredibly thin-skinned as regards criticism of himself.
He can hand it out.
Monstrously rhinoceros-hide, thick-skinned about dealing out to other people, or else maybe just didn't care what they felt. Oh, that was a really good point, actually. Well, he can really dish it out. But my God, if anyone says the faintest thing, I can remember him ringing me up personally when we were on Word magazine to complain bitterly about something someone had said about him, which wasn't that offensive, actually, in the magazine. Incredible.
Well, the other thing that they refer to repeatedly in the documentary, and this is a word that tends to get overused nowadays in my experience, but it probably, if the cap fits, bully is what they're saying.
Yeah.
He's a bully. And of course, if you are a bully, to be the leader of a huge rock band is a brilliant place to be a bully, because you're surrounded by people you can bully.
Yeah.
Other members of the band, management, everybody you deal with, crew, all those people.
Because you call the shots. And
you call the shots.
They're all employed by you. They don't want to blot their copybook.
And so every day you might meet a couple of local radio DJs or a journalist or whatever. There's more people you can bully.
Yeah.
Just line them up if that makes you feel better.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary. The only other thing that I was wondering is that they talk about having made this film because they felt it's really important to make this film because Roger Waters is a rock star, and therefore he has a pulpit from which he can kind of sway large numbers of people. And obviously large numbers of people still go see Roger Waters. Obviously not as many as would do if he was under the banner of Pink Floyd. And I don't know whether that's all that true anymore, really. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people who go and see Roger Waters and are completely impervious to his views on, the congestion charge, let alone Palestine. It's kind of, we're not, is anybody still doing that, really? Did anybody really do it in the past? I don't know. You think people...
I don't know. I thought about it too. And I think that, a lot of the protest songs of the 1960s, what they confirmed was that pop music, rock music was a kind of broadly a left-wing thing. But I don't know how much they converted people. I think they were probably preaching to the converted, weren't they? The anti-war songs in America to a generation of people who were faced with the possible conscription to go and fight in a war. Those people didn't need persuading about how they felt about that. And most of those songs, Emmett Till or Ohio or Strange Fruit or Fortunate Son or whatever, they're songs about past events, I don't know. And there have been all those tours in America, haven't they? The Vote for Change tours, trying to get, do you remember Trump versus
no, it was
John Kerry, wasn't it? Pre-Trump, sorry.
Long pre-Trump.
Bush versus John Kerry. And ultimately Bush got in and Kerry didn't. And I'm sure they had some effect. I just don't know. I don't know how persuasive it all is.
It's interesting, though, to look at that at the time when Taylor Swift is weighing in quite significantly in the American kind of, I wouldn't say political situation, but the kind of culture wars, if you like. And Taylor Swift is obviously just a really exceptional individual, in terms of the following that she's got. And her apparent power to sway makes, Pink Floyd and Roger Waters and the rest look like nothing at all,
Yeah, because she's not only campaigning to try and get people to vote, but also to get them to vote Democrat. I mean, and I think I have to admit, I really admire her for that, because you're risking, aren't you, losing a percentage of your followers, purchasers, whatever, because of your political allegiance. There must be hardcore right-wing supporters who like her, who maybe don't feel very comfortable with that. I've got no idea. But I mean, her sway is phenomenal. I was looking up, do you know how many people she's got following her on Twitter?
It will be
it's
many
94 million on Twitter. Instagram, you ready for this?
Go on.
273 million Instagram followers. I mean, that is just absolutely unbelievable, isn't it? And also, it's her ability to kind of generate publicity, because if you look at the list of famous blokes she's gone out with, which is pretty long and pretty impressive, isn't it? Harry Styles and John Mayer and Jake Gyllenhaal and stuff. She's now going out with, is it Travis Kelce?
Travis Kelce. Listen, Mark. This is the transformational relationship. Because this is like Posh and Beck's, squared.
Gee, oh yeah,
or whatever. It's just absolutely extraordinary. He's the. For those of you who are not keeping up with events in the National Football League, we should point out that Travis Kelce is the 6'5" tight end of the Kansas City Chiefs. So he's an absolute superstar.
Oh, he's a superstar because he's got a podcast, hasn't he?
He's big.
Dated a reality show hostess.
He's big and he's handsome and so forth.
He's won two Super Bowl titles.
But I bet he does not know what's hit him in the last few weeks. Because if you're suddenly adopted as Taylor Swift's arm candy, your life before bears no resemblance to the life that you're now, in. And so she then starts appearing at his games.
Which is brilliant, because
alongside his mother.
His mum. Yeah.
She is,
Colour coordinated.
Listen, she's a genius.
She's a mover, isn't she?
God, she's an operator. Yeah. She is so calculating.
Yeah.
She does not miss a trick. Not a single angle in this at all.
There's a tiny little clip of the two of them walking through the changing room or something like that beforehand. Very uneventful clip. Nobody says anything or does anything. They lost about 5 seconds off. It's been absolutely all over the world. I think the viewing audience for that was something like 25 million, wasn't it, just for that game, which normally wouldn't get a very big audience, 25 million. And they're basically watching to see a whole load of people in the audience holding up banners about Taylor Swift.
She's just absolutely
fantastic.
And so
incredible.
And there ought to be a branch of mathematics devoted to calculating what happens to a famous person, a very famous person, when they become part of a very famous couple. We saw this. Well, it happened with, you and I are old enough to remember it happened with Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor.
Yeah.
Together, they become 5 times bigger than the two of them individually. Same thing happened with Posh and Bex, didn't it? Years later. Same thing happened.
Yeah, but Posh and Bex was kind of bigger in a way because one was a footballer and one was a pop star. Whereas they were both film stars. Whereas this is the genius of this.
This is the genius.
Going out with another pop star, fine. It's another pop star and eventually you're going to finish up together or whatever. But to go out with a superstar sports figure.
This crosses over into the world of, as they call it in America, Joe Sixpack. So the guy who's sitting on his garden, on his lawn furniture, watching the football, out in Moose Droppings, Ohio, suddenly is aware that Taylor Swift has entered into his world and utterly transformed it. And she's going to have to marry him, surely, Mark. Yeah, I mean, she can't just drop him and find another one, can she?
Well, she hasn't married any of the others.
There isn't an available royal at the moment, is there? There isn't.
No, what you're saying is there anybody higher up in the ladder? That's
well, if only there were a sort of handsome 28-year-old royal over here, she'd probably snap him up, if he was available, but he isn't.
That's true.
So, for the moment, Travis Kelce will have to do. So it's an absolutely fascinating branch of show business and celebrity and romance, all these things tangled up together, and it just, everybody loves it, don't we?
Completely.
The whole world loves it.
I'd never heard of this guy till yesterday, and I've been reading all about him. I'm fascinated. And it's brilliantly calculating. But who knows, Dave? There may be genuine fondness there.
The Word Podcast, 2 cocoa tins and a piece of string.
We didn't talk about last week the passing of David McCallum, who you and I remember as Ilya Kuryakin, the men from U.'s, or one of the men from U.'s.
I remember him so vividly. What I remember most was the different reactions between my sisters, my elder sisters and me, to the man from U.'s. You know, I was probably sort of typical schoolboy. I was obsessed with the gadgets. I don't know if do you remember that? The gadgets. There were some pretty impressive cars in a kind of Bond style-y. But the thing I remember most is they had little tiny revolvers with telescopic sights on them, which all seemed terribly thrilling at the time. My sisters used to sit there with their chins suspended on a kind of suspension bridge of fingers, just looking moon-eyed at Ilya Kuryakin. And he was kind of like, it's funny, I noticed Muriel Gray had posted something about him on Twitter and saying how he's Glaswegian, actually, which I'm not sure if I knew. You know, I was looking at the replies, and the replies were almost entirely from girls saying, women. Was my first crush.
They're always entirely from grandmothers.
Grandmothers.
Who were basically
girls, but yeah, grandmothers. Exactly. Saying this is my first crush. Because he was they were huge when that program.
He was,
and a lot of it was to do with he had a Beatle haircut. You know?
That's the thing.
Didn't he?
You know, because so they commissioned the series in the wake of Bond fever.
Yeah.
And it's obviously Robert Vaughan, who's Napoleon Solo, isn't he? He's the main character. And then they sign up this Scottish character actor, David McCallum, to play Ilya Kuryakin. And I think in the original script, we only had 4 lines. 4 lines.
Was that it? And it suddenly grew from there.
And they just developed it. And
MGM said they had the most fan mail about him than anybody else they'd ever had in their television programs.
When he used to do personal appearances, they used to say police motorcades used to issue instructions that they were not allowed to stop ever, because there would just be a riot that would close down whatever city it was.
Yeah.
So here's this guy who he was an actor. He was just an actor, Scottish actor. Came from a musical background. I think both parents were classical musicians. And, he gets into this part and it's just a whirlwind. It makes him an absolute superstar for a while. And then...
And also just a huge number of spy duos after that, weren't there? Because it was all about the Cold War, wasn't it? They were in a kind of espionage organization, weren't they, during the Cold War, and that became incredibly fashionable in itself. But huge. And
then he used his celebrity, didn't he, to make records, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He made 4 albums, didn't he? Which I was listening to yesterday, and I'd heard of odds and ends before, and I didn't realize they were all instrumental.
Yeah.
Are there any with him singing? I don't think there are, actually.
No, I mean, he was a trained musician, I think, because he came from a musical background.
Yeah,
I think his father particularly. So he was obviously capable. But these records, because
they're brilliant. They're very Austin Powers. I was playing one yesterday. Do you know that they're versions of Yesterday, Satisfaction, Turn, the In Crowd. Downtown, we've got to get out of this place. All that played by an orchestra, which was conducted by him. Who knows? He possibly played the oboe too. I don't know, but
I think he was in the capable musician.
Oh yeah, he was.
And then later on, obviously did loads of things, and then turned up on what was it called? One of these many police procedural series on streaming TVs, which has a kind of an acronym as a name, and I can't remember what it was. And he played a kind of pathologist in this, and was still playing this part up to when he died. And he was 90 years old. That was the thing. I was amazed. That's a hell of a career. That is.
It's amazing, isn't it?
He must have been he was acting from the age of about 21 to the age of 90. That's just remarkable. But I tell you what, this got me thinking about was that syndrome whereby certain actors, certain very fortunate actors, find themselves as a consequence of a casting decision that takes place when they're young, that they become by the association of them and the part, a sex symbol, and they never shake it off. And so David McCallum, in the role of Ilya Kuryakin, was what made him a sex symbol. It wasn't David McCallum. It was David McCallum in that part is what made him a sex symbol.
And there was a mystery about him. Did he have a tragic secret?
He's supposed to have a tragic secret. So
did we ever find out what it was?
I don't know. So, but girls get looking at, like your sister or my sister or whatever, we used to look at him and think, oh, I could sort out his problems. You know?
Yeah.
It appealed to that side of them.
Yeah.
But it made me compile a little list here of actors who became sex symbols in a certain role in a way that nothing could ever be the same again. And the obvious one is Colin Firth as Mr. Darcy in Pride and Prejudice.
Yes.
He's so
hard done by, noble, stood by her, didn't he? Dependable.
No, but not so much that. I mean, he was a bit of a heartless beast, wasn't he? But basically, you know, appeared out of the lake with his shirt sticking to his torso. So he kind of looked like the cover of a Mills and Boon book, didn't he? But the point is, Colin Firth, terrific actor and so forth. But I don't think before that he'd ever been referred to as a sex bot. But after that, he was always referred to as a sex bot.
In the frilly blouse. He was, completely.
And the more recent example, Andrew Scott as the hot priest in Fleabag.
Andrew Scott will go to his grave known as the hot priest, which he was never called, was he? By anyone apart from the media and people who watch the programme.
But again, it's the actor in the role. It's the actor, and he's a priest. That's the thing that kind of makes it work.
But it was also her breaking the fourth wall, turning to you and telling you the whole time how much she fancied him. And made him intensely attractive somehow. You could see why he was attractive.
Another one, and he's no longer with us, James Gandolfini as Tony Soprano in The Sopranos. You know, brilliant. God, I mean, if ever a man was born to play a part, that was James Gandolfini in The Sopranos. But I was watching a terrific clip on YouTube of when he appeared as Tony Soprano, as one of the guest stars in Saturday Night Live, doing a sketch with Tina Fey. And at the end, Tina Fey says, "That's the scariest man I have ever been attracted to." Which gets at the same point. You know what I mean? That what's sexy is the fact that, oh my God, he's a crime boss. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a combination of the two. And
well, you could probably say the same about Sean Bean, couldn't you? There's certainly something similar about him. My wife was absolutely besotted with Sean Bean at the time. Sean Bean, as she used to call him. And I think a lot of it's to do with not just the collarless military jacket, a la Terence Stamp in
Georgia Library.
It's the fact and the stubble and the square jaw. It's the fact that the sword and the just physicality. This is a man who's going to look after you. You wouldn't get into trouble if Sean Bean was on your arm. You know what I mean?
It's also the fact that he comes from Yorkshire rather than Hampshire, Mark.
Yeah, it could be that.
But there are also obviously female cases, a bit similar. Felicity Kendal as Barbara Good in The Good Life.
Completely.
You know, anything Felicity Kendal does all these years later is still compared to, oh God, do you remember when she,
Well, I always thought the attraction of Felicity Kendal in The Good Life was the fact that she was always wearing kind of his jumpers and things, wasn't she? She was, there was something really domestic and actually rather intimate about that. You felt you lived with that girl. I think I was a student at the time. Well, no, it was before that, actually. But you kind of imagined you were living with her. You know what I mean? This kind of run-down old house.
And she very often had a bit of paint on her nose. Yeah. Or something like that. She's very often blowing a hank of hair out of her eyes.
That's right.
It was the fact...
Her hair was all over the place.
It was the fact that she wasn't dressed up.
Yeah, she was covered in mud.
That was really appealing.
She never wore makeup.
I know women's magazines used to spend pages and pages trying to work out what what men find attractive. They could have saved themselves a lot of trouble by looking at Barbara Good in The Good Life. Actually.
They could.
Because another case, actually, Julia Louis-Dreyfus as Elaine Bennis in Seinfeld. Now, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who I adore, and she's done loads of things, Veep and all those things, she will always be Elaine Bennis in Seinfeld.
Yeah.
She will always be that kind of 30-year-old girl who lives next door, who's, always got a new boyfriend or something. She's footloose and fancy-free, and, she's a young woman around town. And that will never go away.
Yeah, it has no impression you get of how good-looking she is at all. Doesn't seem to be remotely aware of that, which is very attractive too.
I suppose so. Yeah, it's very attractive.
Yeah.
And the other one that just struck me finally is that, again, no longer with us, Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia in Star Wars. Now, Carrie Fisher made loads of films, and then loads of them really good. At no stage did anybody fall in love with her in any of the other films at all. As Princess Leia in Star Wars, they did, in their millions, you know what I mean? And that just remained the case for many years later, It's, I find it absolutely fascinating.
Hugh Laurie
in
House.
In House.
Isn't that something to do with just the general appeal of the bedside manner? I think it is, actually.
Well, it's rather gruff, isn't he? That's kind of the appeal. He's not doing the obvious thing at all. There's always some little twist to that. They're always playing slightly against type. I found it absolutely fascinating. So if anybody's got any more, send them in.
Unlikely sex symbols. Send them in.
This is a junction in the word podcast. It separates that bit from this next bit.
This week we talked to Gary Numan for a word down your way, because he's touring between now and Christmas, doing a kind of unplugged tour, isn't he? Of
acoustic tour of churches, mostly churches and a cathedral. Brilliant idea. Really good idea.
And I have to say, it was a unique, in all my interactions with pop stars, this one was utterly unique. Do you know why, Mark? Because when we first got him on, we did it via Zoom, and I think it was before we were recording. And you said, Mark, well, Gary, I don't think I've seen you since whenever, 79 or 80 or whatever.
Yeah, it was 81. The cover of Smash Hits in his Bogart hat, his Macintosh.
And to which he said, oh, that would have been just after I had my hair transplant. And I was wearing the hat to cover up what was going on. And then I did. And I thought, my God, this is there you go. This is the first pop star I've ever talked to who within 30 seconds has introduced the subject of a hair transplant. And
do you know why he did it?
Go on.
Because it's so successful.
I suppose so.
I mean, it is, had it been in any way patchy and having to be kind of touched up every few years, I think he'd be probably very quiet about it. He'd be probably wearing a number of head, as a lot of pop stars do. But no. It's the most lustrous thatch that he has on there. And he looks brilliant. He looks fantastic. My God, he looks good.
He does.
I thought that was very funny.
I was kicking myself afterwards. I thought, oh, God, we could have talked to him about it.
No, actually, he volunteered that information. We should have said something about it. I know. I thought he was fantastic. I thought the thing that struck me about him, of many actually, was that he seemed to be didn't seem to be a bitter bone in his body.
No.
He seemed to be completely content, not in a self-satisfied way, not remotely, far from it, just the complete opposite. He was very, very grateful, very appreciative of everything that happened to him.
Yeah.
And he seemed really fulfilled. We talked to him. He was in a what you'd call a kind of almost like a hunting lodge.
Hunting lodge in Scotland, yeah.
Which he bought to do up. It had a great stretch of river, which you could. People were happy to pay £1,000 a day to fish on, but his wife wouldn't allow it because she's vegetarian. He was now going to try and convince them this is a bad idea because £1,000 a day is pretty good. He's such a good businessman, isn't he? He's amazing. But I just thought he just seemed so happy and so content and so much enjoyed touring and so much enjoyed making records. And his life seemed really, really wonderful. And I just thought that guy went through a lot of grief, didn't he?
Yeah.
When I was at the NME, that kind of Gary Numan was the butt of every joke.
Oh, he was.
That kind of 9-pint blood donor kind of android git nerd, with his kind of pinched approach to life and his prodding away at his synthesizer. And what everyone ought to like was, the Redskins or, I don't know, some group with guitars, And my God, within about, 2 or 3 years, just being hailed as a major electronic pop pioneer, wasn't he? And has never looked back.
Never looked back. I mean, that's a long old career, that is,
Yeah, it really is.
Been famous for a long, long time. And
21 albums. Amazing. And he told 2 really good stories, didn't he? One which you'll have to watch the thing to find out. One was basically about going to see David Bowie, wasn't it? And throwing a glow stick at him, and which hit him. So he threw the glow stick that hit David Bowie while he was on stage. So he was slightly ambivalent about that. And the other was just this brilliant story about getting Queen's autograph
and then losing them.
Yeah, and I was very. I thought he was really charming. Really,
he was absolutely charming. I liked him a great deal. And he's on tour between now and Christmas. He's probably playing the church down the end of your road.
The word podcast. Clearly, there is no plan.
Reader's correspondence, Mark. This is from Bob. I think it's Lysa in Glasgow. We were talking about tribute acts. We're very often talking about tribute acts. And
regular subject. We love him.
And he kind of knows Lorraine McIntosh of Deacon Blue. And he's kind of he's always trying to find out what she thinks of Deacon Blue tribute bands, because he's interested in that. Is what does an original band think about its tribute acts? And obviously there's been a lot of traffic between tribute acts and the bands themselves, haven't they, over the years? Was it Marillion hired a singer from a Marillion tribute band? Genesis hired a singer from a Genesis tribute band? I think they did. And there's the extraordinary story of Mike Del Judas, who's a very good Long Island musician who tried to make it on his own but never did, and so started running a Billy Joel tribute band called Big Shot, which became really popular, and got so many dates that eventually he got members of Billy Joel's band who were frustrated by the fact that Billy Joel himself wasn't on tour to come and play in the band. So effectively you were saying the Billy Joel band without Billy Joel. But you had Mike Del Judas, who played the piano, played the guitar, could do all the vocals, Uptown Girl, Just the Way You Are, all that kind of stuff. And eventually, who got to hear about it but Billy Joel? And so Mike Del Judas ended up in Billy Joel's band.
Perfect.
Being effectively second Billy Joel. You're the guy in the background.
Hitting all the high notes that he can no longer hit.
Very probably.
That's fantastic.
40 years old or whatever, rather than 70.
Yeah.
Turns up the sound, the sound checks and so forth. Covers absolutely anything Billy can't do. And so, I suppose, and one of the things that Billy Joel said to him, and this may have been a certain amount of flannel, but he said, "Thank you for keeping my music alive on the island," as in Long Island. And I think there's some truth in that, that what's the good thing about tribute groups? Well, they keep you alive, don't they? You know what I mean?
They do.
Because people only bother doing tributes to bands for whom there's kind of some love. That's what the deal is, isn't it, really? And sometimes the artist doesn't realize the love that they have, And
David Gilmour got the Australian Pink Floyd played his 50th birthday. I can remember being told about that. Because he really thought they were wonderful, and he thought it was kind of a bit arch as well. But I think he was really, really touched by the fact that they were so good.
Yeah, I bet.
I think the thing that would really, really be fascinating if you saw a tribute band doing the act that you were in, it'd be like seeing someone do a cartoon of you. A cartoon is caricatures. It's taking idiosyncrasies, it's taking mannerisms, it's taking things about your physical appearance and about the things you say and the things you do. And I think that'd be really interesting. It's like, it's like our producer Alex is in various Beatles, tribute bands. It's the idea of what little mannerisms that you have. For Paul McCartney, that little thumbs up and all that kind of stuff. The way he shakes his head. And the John Lennon kind of squinting without glasses, the kind of myopic thing with his bent legs. I think that must be really interesting to see yourself reduced to that kind of cartoon. Someone studied you to that extent.
Yeah. Further correspondence. This is from Tim Calloway, who points out that in certain quarters, cassettes are becoming popular again, trendy again or whatever. And he points out something about the cassette that doesn't apply to a CD or any other music carrier, that when you put in, you get a cassette out of a drawer and you put it in a cassette player, it starts playing at exactly the point where you stopped listening 20 years ago,
yes.
30 years ago, 40 years ago. Who knows? It says there seems to be something profound and important here in how we're taken back to continue from another time or from another version of ourselves with the music beginning exactly where we left it. He says, I like that about cassettes. It's a very good point, Tim.
That's a really good point. That's really interesting.
I don't know what it means, Tim, at all.
I had that with my kids in computer games. They found a load of computer games up in the attic they'd been playing 25 years beforehand, I think. And they finished them off. And there were the scores on them that they had, and they finished the games off. It was absolutely wonderful.
Oh, really? Really?
Again, teleported back through time.
And a further bit of correspondence to prove, what I'm always saying is that people nowadays know far more about things that happened in the past than anybody knew in the past. We were talking to Neil Story recently about Neil's fabulous history of Island Records, the Island Book of Records, first volume. And we were talking about, he's got loads of old small ads, semi-display ads from music papers of listings for the marquee from 67, 68 or whatever. And we were saying how most of the bands on those listings we'd still heard of or almost still playing nowadays.
Yeah, there was 1 week where I think we still heard of 14 of the bands. It was still vaguely current. There was only one that had disappeared.
Well, we said red light districts, whatever happened to them.
Yeah.
Well, Dara is here to tell us it was a temporary name used by a 3-piece blues rock outfit from Belfast called The Method, who have been creating quite a stir in clubs north and south of the border around about 1967. And right before they decamped to London in search of fame and fortune in the summer of 68, a 16-year-old Gary Moore played a few gigs with the band as the trio's main guitarist. So, there are no secrets anymore, are they? It's the idea that somebody knows that, you know what I mean? There's no such thing as a band that's completely disappeared. There's left no trace. Is there? I don't think there is anymore. And actually, there's a challenge for you, listeners. If you ever look at an old listing and think, well, they disappeared without trace, did they really? I fancy they didn't.
Nobody does.
Nobody disappears. Nobody.
The Word Podcast. It passes the time.
Any other business with Alex Gold. He's back, ladies and gentlemen, on dry land and with us with news of new Patreon supporters, Alex.
Indeed. There's quite a number this week, actually.
Good. We like that. Go on.
We like that very much. They're extremely welcome.
Absolutely. And the first one of them is Alan Wallace.
Oh, Alan Wallace. I know Alan Wallace. Very nice to have you aboard, Alan. Carry on.
Kevin Caswell-Jones.
I don't know Kevin Caswell-Jones, but I feel I'm going to. Go on.
The mysterious Andy.
Oh, Andy.
Just Andy.
Just Andy.
You know Andy. Andy. Then we have Peter Kirkham.
Peter Kirkham.
Excellent.
Welcome, Peter.
Bill Ambrose.
Bill Ambrose, also welcome.
Come in and pull up a seat.
Ian Lowes.
Ian Lowes.
Okay, splendid.
Thomas Johnson.
Hello, Thomas.
Good
Richard
man.
Ching.
Who?
Richard Ching.
Richard Ching, okay.
Superb.
Mark Hughes.
Mark Hughes. The car's catchy, isn't it? Mark Hughes, yeah, carry on.
floating our boat.
Floating.
Mr. and Mrs. Our Boat's son floating.
Yeah, they used to do that thing, didn't they? On I'm sorry,
Late arrivals at the so-and-so ball, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that used to be. That was a joy. That was. And can we remind people?
Oh, before we do, we actually have some more patrons. I'm sorry.
Go on.
Patrons are annual patrons.
So right.
Annually, which means they get 15% off their subscription, which is a good thing, obviously. Gavin Hogg.
Oh,
Gavin. Welcome, Gavin.
Old pal.
Alkins.
Sorry, I missed that.
Colin Alkins.
Hello, welcome, Colin. Splendid.
We also have Joel Diath, a.k.a. Bride Today Vinyl.
Oh yeah. Joel, yes.
Great admirers. We did a big Zoom about his record business. Yeah.
Andrew Rumsey.
Andrew also.
Good. Welcome aboard, Andrew.
And last but certainly not least is Craig Mason.
Thank you, Splendid. Craig. Very good to have you all on board.
You're all extremely welcome.
And so for the benefit of anybody who doesn't know, Alex, why don't you just reiterate the many benefits of being a Patreon supporter?
Okay, so there are many tiers, and you can look at them all with many benefits at patreon.com/word in your ear. But broadly speaking, you get access to our legendary weekly quiz, where we all gather at 6 p.m. on a Friday night and try to guess an album via 10 mysterious clues. You get early and ad-free access to all of our content, so all of our podcasts, all of our video content, early bird access to our live events. Now we've started doing them again.
Very important.
Indeed, absolutely. And also, if you subscribe to our Clubhouse tier, which is the top Patreon tier we offer at the moment, you get your very own birthday podcast, and also you get an invite to our biannual socials.
Absolutely. But you should just stress once more, being a Patreon supporter means you get priority access to our Word in Your Ear evenings, and we had the first one for a while earlier this week at 21 Soho, with Richard Moulton Jack talking about Nick Drake and Kathy Unsworth talking about goth. I think it's fair to say it was a success.
It was a great success, yeah. And we're having, in fact, we planned quite a few more. We're having another one on October the 30th. Ian Brodie, The Lightning Seeds, talking about, life in Liverpool in the late 70s when the whole city was in the charts. Bonnie Men and the Teardrops and Big in Japan, and the ascent of the Lightning Seeds and co-writing the new national anthem, 3 lines. And we got John Higgs, haven't we, at the KLF, who will be talking about, Tammy Wynette and punk and rave and the ABBA court case, pelting crowds with cash, the famous bonfire in the Jura Boathouse. It's going to be really good. They're both very good talkers. It's going to be a fantastic evening.
So that's October the 30th. Get your tickets now if you haven't done so already, because they're going quickly. And we hope to be announcing quite soon a further show for November at the same place, 21 Soho, which is just around the corner from Tottenham Court Road Tube Station. So it's easily accessible.
Massively easy to get to.
And it might be something, if you're coming from out of town, that you want to combine maybe with a day's Christmas shopping or something like that. I like the idea of people turning up at 21 Soho in the evening, wearing over...
Weighed down with parcels, that's right.
Weighing down with parcels, with a light frosting of snow coming. They'd be nice.
Step down a Dickensian card. That's right.
No, I think, they should...
A mince pie.
It should be like, one of them's Danny Kaye and the other one's, kind of Veronica Lake or something. And they're shaking the snow off them. And then you hear, as the door of 21 Soho opened, you hear the distant sound of a small child chirping carols.
That's right.
I'm a
chink of mulled wine glasses. Do I wonder if we could actually organise a live, could we have an open fire? Could we have crackling logs? Could we do the whole thing by a hearth?
This podcast was brought to you by The Word.